I've gone on record saying that the show I've watched the most in my life is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Partly because as a kid, I rewatched this show constantly. Basically everything about it, my kid brain just loved so much. The animation is beautiful and captivating. The characters and even the villains are so rich and enjoyable. The music is just pure fire all the way through. But as an adult who has responsibilities and some weird back pain that won't go away, this show still blows me away with every watch through. And once a year, I think to myself, was Avatar: The Last Airbender really that good? Is nostalgia pulling a prank on me? The only way to know is if I rewatch it, but there's no way this show is that good. This is the best show ever made. Oh my gosh, this is the best show. It's just such an amazing show in so many areas that I have a great sense of fondness for everything it delivers. But one aspect of the show that is so astounding is the victorious and powerful story and eventual conclusion of this show. Sozin's Comet is a 4-part finale that brings the show to a genuinely perfect closing that genuinely isn't talked about enough. But why is this so good? Why is it that this silly Nickelodeon show has one of the most emotional and triumphant endings of any show I've watched? And to celebrate this show's 20th anniversary, take a moment for those who just found out ATLA is 20 years old. What better way than to talk about the absolute insanity and genius of this beautifully created masterpiece? Before we get into it though, I want to emphasize a hefty spoiler warning, and for a show like this, please heed this warning because this is one of the best shows of all time. If you've never watched it, please shut this video off. Go watch it and then come back to this video. It's genuinely worth the watch, and I would hate to be the one to spoil such an amazing show for you. And just so you know, this isn't a suggestion, by the way. This is a warning. Watch the show. Now let's start with Aang's story. He is our main protagonist after all, and his story is one of the reasons this show's story and finale hits as hard as it does. When Aang is first introduced, he is portrayed time and time again as a goofy, energetic, and optimistic kid. When he wakes up from the iceberg and meets Katara and Sokka, he is an immature and often flawed young kid who doesn't fully understand his responsibilities and great powers he has as the Avatar. He's a 12-year-old boy who woke up to a world that's fallen into disarray, and he, as the Avatar, is in charge of bringing balance to this broken world. And at the beginning of the show, he ignores that responsibility because he just wants to have fun and have a normal childhood. But pretty early on, Aang's story is shot into overdrive when he finds out that firebenders killed his entire culture and his best friend. This moment when Aang realizes that he's the last airbender and a following moment with Roku are the kickstarters for Aang's development as a character. The former scene with Roku is an important one because he learns from his past life, an earlier Avatar, that he has to not only master all 4 elements in the span of a month, something that usually takes years to do, but also that he has to defeat the Fire Nation to save the entire world. So he learns through this scene that he can't goof off all summer. He can't put off training to have fun with his newly met friends. He has to literally save the world from the most powerful people on the planet, and he has to do it fast. And I thought AP tests were stressful. So these beginning episodes are pretty genius in how they show Aang's initial character. And throughout the show, we see how Aang changes, the most obvious being his literal physical strength. Initially, he only knows airbending, which is, cool and all, but as he progresses through his journey, he learns water from Master Pakku and Katara, earth from Toph, and fire from Zuko, who we'll get into in a bit. So the show's progression on a visual level is very fascinating and engaging. Aang learning not only the different elements, but the different styles of fighting, the different techniques of each style, really bring Aang's development forward as we see how he's becoming stronger and more prepared for the fight ahead of him. But not only is he growing physically in terms of power, but he's also becoming stronger mentally. Throughout the show, Aang grows from a goofy, fun-loving child into a more mature Avatar. And I think there's a few places in the show that highlight this growth masterfully. I mentioned the beginning of the show where Aang just wants to mess around all summer, but then once he realizes the responsibilities he has, he locks in and focuses on this very time-constrained journey. But it's not only that, but also his wisdom that grows throughout the show. The moments that jump out to me is when Aang loses Appa and goes through a multi-episode arc of coming to terms with who he is without his fluffy, slobbery, gross friend, but also grapples with his anger and how he has to control his vengeful wants in this moment as he is the Avatar. The most powerful scene during this arc is the confrontation with the Sandbenders, where Aang loses control when he finds out that they took Appa. He so full of rage and revenge that he loses himself and literally goes into the avatar state out of pure anger and raw emotion. But this scene is incredibly important for him and also the audience in showing his immaturity and lack of control. It's a very important lesson that Aang has to learn in order to grow into a peaceful and fair avatar. And this series-wide growth is emphasized when Katara goes on her own revenge trip during the Southern Raiders episode. Katara and Zuko, who we'll get into in a bit, go on a trip to enact justice on the man who killed Katara's mother, and before they go, Aang states that he knows exactly how she feels and cites the Airbenders and the Sandbenders as examples. More specifically, the latter, with how revenge is never the right option and that Katara saw what revenge did to Aang, and now she has the chance to avoid falling in the same trap. Aang learns from his past experiences and uses those moments to help Katara, who's going through a very, very difficult yet similar time. And I think this moment contrasts Jet really well randomly. I know, like, Jet, what? Let me explain. In the first season, when Aang and his friends meet Jet, he's so consumed by revenge that he's willing to wipe out an entire town of innocent people in order to get revenge on the Fire Nation. In this moment, Aang and Katara do everything they can to stop him because they understand that taking out revenge can harm innocent people around them. But when it comes to the Sandbenders or the Southern Raiders, both Aang and Katara fall into similar situations. This showcases Aang's maturity geniusly. He knew from the first season that revenge bad, forgiveness good, you know, forgive 70 times 7 type beat. But through his own struggles, he fully embraces and grows through that. The first season, he was a goofy kid. The second season hardened his heart a little bit through difficult and stressful times. And the third season shows what he's learned from those struggles. He doesn't let Appa's disappearances or the death of the Airbenders or any of the other many difficult situations that he goes through ruin him as a person. He grows from it. He becomes wiser and he becomes the person that the monks always wanted him to be. And that leads beautifully to the finale with Ozai, but I'll talk about the finale later. For now, just reflect on the beauty of Aang's story. A silly 12-year-old bluntly learning, oh shoot, I have to literally save the world by summer's end. And there are so many other places and events that take place from the beginning of the story to the end that highlight his growth both physically and mentally to prepare him for one of the hardest fights of his entire life. There's an episode early on when he literally gets an ego check. There's an episode when Aang burns Katara through his recklessness. But by the end of the show, he comes to terms with his mistakes and learns both restraint and self-forgiveness. Parts of the show like these grow Aang's character slowly and geniusly, and by the end of the show, he's ready for the Fire Lord, both mentally and physically. I can't really talk about Avatar without mentioning, how should I put this? One of the greatest stories of all time, that of course being the story of Zuko. When we begin the show, Zuko is set up to be a run-of-the-mill bad guy. He's got a fiery temper, and he wants to capture the Avatar really, really badly. It isn't immediately explained why he wants to do this, just that he believes capturing the Avatar will allow him to return to his home for some reason. But this detail really emphasizes the story and explanation that Uncle Iroh gives during the episode titled The Storm. This backstory is actually one of the most important parts of Zuko's story. We see that there's actually more depth to his character than just a standard bad guy. It's really powerful seeing a hateable villain like Zuko humanized through a simple act like speaking out against commanders sending troops to die just as a diversion. And that action leading to his father abusing and then banishing him for a moral act not only props up Zuko as a character, but also builds Ozai as a villain. And I'll get to Ozai in a minute, but I think this moment is such a powerful and necessary explanation for the audience to truly understand Zuko as a person. Another moment that builds Zuko's character is when he saves Aang as the Blue Spirit. Was he really saving him? Definitely not. But when he gets knocked out, Aang gives this really sweet dialogue about how one of his best friends back in the day was from the Fire Nation. And he brings a connection between that friend and Zuko, saying if Zuko were alive back then, they might have been friends. It's such a powerful message and really solidifies Zuko's true character. He's not some evil maniac, another character takes that role. He's a broken child whose family life was so destructive, he's chasing this false destiny of capturing the Avatar just so he can get back to it. And as the story progresses, the moments that stand out to me are the ones where Zuko has to decide between this false destiny of capturing the Avatar and some other more personal choices. An early one being when Zuko ignores Aang to save his uncle, or later when he has to choose between helping Katara and Aang or joining Azula and Azula, or joining Azula in fighting them. Zuko throughout the first season grows very subtly, but it's the second season that highlights his growth the best, especially the episode Zuko Alone. There's a reason why this episode is often regarded as the best in the series. It's a masterpiece within a greater masterpiece, especially in the way it's able to tell Zuko's current and past stories in even more depth. Seeing Zuko's mother and seeing how close they are brings such heartbreak to when she's eventually banished to save him. Zuko living among an Earth Kingdom family and doing what he can to save their son is unbelievably powerful. The episode amazingly shows how Zuko actually is versus who he thinks he is. He's a deeply caring and understanding individual, but he sees himself as the heir to the throne of a nation that is causing unimaginable destruction and chaos. In the words of his mother, he's someone who keeps fighting no matter what. He's a good person, but his circumstances changed him into something else. Someone who's willing to save a family's son even though he doesn't know them that well, but in a moment of kill or be killed, he sides with the man who scarred him. And later in this season, there's a moment where he's just learned how to redirect lightning, and he goes into a literal lightning storm to try it out, but the storm doesn't strike him. And there's some rich subtext to this scene where Zuko is always hit with bad things from life. His life is a constant roller coaster of unfortunate events, but in this moment, when he actually wants something bad to happen, it doesn't. Just a side note, there's a lot of powerful and emotional moments in this show, but this scene gets me every time. It's just such a powerful place to bring this broken and shattered character brought to a point where he wants to be struck by lightning just to prove he's capable of something greater, but he isn't given that chance. But there's more to the story, because when Zuko and Iroh become refugees and go to Ba Sing Se, the show really develops Zuko's character into a more outwardly positive person, either through little episodes like the Tales of Ba Sing Se, where we learn that Iroh's loss for his son makes him care for Zuko that much more, and how Zuko wants a regular peaceful life but is conflicted from his past life, or through larger choices. When he chooses to let Appa go, he literally catches COVID and becomes bedridden for days because it messes with his core to do something so selfless. But through Iroh's wisdom and the fact that Azula is the human equivalent to a chihuahua, he begins to see the reality of his situation and who he really is. The storm showed that Zuko is a good person deep down, but his arc during the second season showed that it's not that deep down inside him after all. He just needed to realize the truth of where he fits into this world. And that growth of becoming a better person and living a life of peace and love with his uncle, and a following scene where Zuko and Katara actually talk and understand each other, develops Zuko on an even deeper level. And so when Zuko is put into a position to either choose his previous delusion or help Aang and throw that away, his choice to side with Azula here is heartbreaking. While previous fights with Zuko have been pretty one-sided, the audience sides with Aang 100% of the time and doesn't like Zuko at all, this fight is different because while we're still on Aang's side, Zuko's season-wide arc leads to a feeling of betrayal and sadness that other fights have lacked. Because now the audience desperately wants to see Zuko choose the right side and help Aang, but he still doesn't. And as we enter the final season, Zuko's story takes an interesting and satisfying path. Throughout the first seasons, all he wanted was to go home. He has this delusion that it would be perfect in everything that he would want in life, but now that he actually returns home, he's annoyed and a little bit depressed to find out that it isn't at all what he wanted. He feels shallow and confused at the things he thought would bring him joy, and we see him start to connect the dots of what he actually needs to do. His uncle, being the goat of the show, sends a message to him saying that his grandfather was actually a past avatar, and in doing so, Zuko learns that he and Aang aren't so far apart as he thought. Couple that with the earlier conversation between Aang and Zuko, and you have a really interesting dynamic between these two central protagonists. And this story culminates to the day of Black Sun, where he finally stands up to his father and states that he will join and help the Avatar. At this moment, I think we all jumped up in excitement. It's so satisfying to see Zuko finally fully commit to Aang's cause, and seeing this slow change from a troubled villain into a triumphant hero is absolutely captivating. And remember that scene where Zuko was yelling at the clouds, asking them to strike him just so he can feel like he's accomplished something? Well, in this moment, when he knows his path, he's able to redirect that lightning. He is capable of great things, and this is that powerful moment where he actually does. And when he finally joins Team Avatar, which takes some convincing, the show slows down and focuses on each character becoming closer to him. And these final episodes bring Zuko's arc to a final place. He was the outsider, but now he's an integral part of Team Avatar. And I think Zuko's constant regret of all the bad that he's done when talking to Team Avatar really shows his growth. It takes a very strong person to admit verbally when they mess up, and Zuko's admittance to Team Avatar is really powerful to see. And I'll get to the finale later, but Zuko's arc really is one of the best parts of the show and why it feels so victorious at the end, because while Aang is getting stronger and more mature, Zuko is going through his internal struggle between good and evil. The audience always feels like there's good in him, but his choices early on reflect a different and broken person. So when Zuko finally chooses to do good and break the generational trends of violence and hate, it's unbelievably victorious. Now, these are only a few protagonists I wanted to highlight. I could really go on and on about every character in this show, so let's rattle off a few more just to get a better overall idea. Katara starts off the show as a strong-willed leader who tends to lean more optimistic, and she remains that way throughout the show, but early on, she's not the strongest in terms of bending and combat. She was the only waterbender in the South Pole after all. But after a while of training herself and with Master Pakku, Katara becomes a stronger and more able fighter capable of amazing feats. The episode The Puppet Master emphasizes her growth pretty well when she literally learns how to bend the blood in another person's veins. I watched this show when I was 5. It's really captivating seeing her arc of becoming better through practice and determination, and it pushes the story forward in an interesting way. But her character isn't just a fighter, she's also determined and a leader. Like when they lose Appa and they're literally stuck in the desert, she is the only one locked in enough to focus and get them out. Katara is just a captivating character on so many levels, and I love what the show does with her growth. Sokka has a few arcs throughout the show, but one of the most pertinent ones for this video is his leadership. Even as far as the Day of Black Sun, Sokka is not the greatest leader in the face of great challenges. Sure, he does some great things, and he's a pretty good leader for a good chunk of the show, but when the Day of Black Sun happens, he completely freezes and doesn't know what to do when it's this big of a deal. But through the example of his father and his personal growth into a more knowledgeable person, he becomes a better leader, and it really shows towards the end. And it's also really cool to see him learn his own technique to help the gang through his study of sword fighting. That storyline is just really entertaining, and I've always loved how it leads into the finale. Toph is a late addition to the show, but that does not make her less interesting. She starts off as a gruff and confident child whose parents are way too protective, and because of that, her personality is a very fun contrast to Aang and Katara's more gentle nature. And I think one of the most impressive moments for Toph is her metal bending. Until her, metal bending was impossible, but because she's literally built different, she invents and perfects the skill. And that's cool as hell, and it works really well in the finale when they literally need metal bending for a lot of the different areas and fighting. I also think the old people, the White Lotus, also bring a lot to the story. It's captivating seeing Team Avatar meet more and more great masters of different skills. Zhang Zhang, Bumi, Piandao, and especially Iroh make the story feel so much more alive and rich. And because the gang meets with them at the end of the show, it really wraps up the story beautifully. All the people they have met along the way come together for the finale, and I really like how these masters in particular are used. Okay, that's enough talking about the good guys for now. Why don't we talk about another reason this show builds perfectly to that victorious ending: the villains. Now, I talked a lot about one of them, Zuko. Do I have to say any more? He's the lovable villain who becomes good in the end, but the show also sports a lot of rotten to the core villains that push the story forward. Azula is a perfect example of this. If you Google the definition of insanity, it's literally just a picture of Azula. She is a phenomenal villain. Calculated, manipulative, a master fighter, and slightly more unhinged than that uncle you don't talk to, Azula is an unbeatable wild card for a large chunk of the show's runtime. Throughout the second season, it always seems like Azula is one step ahead of the gang, and even when she loses a fight, she wins in some unknown way, and she really only gets better and stronger as the show progresses, until Mei and Ty Lee turn against her. Once her two best, and really only, friends join the opposing side, we really see her life and power go down the drain. After this moment, her mannerism, style, and overall aura just becomes more deranged. It's especially noticeable in the finale where she's so paranoid of betrayal that she fires and banishes anyone who does something even slightly wrong. So Azula is kind of the antithesis of Zuko. Instead of becoming a more positive influence on himself and the people around him, Azula becomes psychotic and more chaotic as the show moves forward. And I'll touch on this in a later section, but this difference between Zuko and Azula really make that final confrontation between them all that more powerful and victorious. The most influential villain in my mind is Fire Lord Ozai. On the surface, Ozai is a basic, bland villain. He's the king of a nation that wants to take over the world. That's pretty much it. But that simplicity really makes this character such a formidable foe and such a polar opposite to Aang. For the first 2 seasons, the impact of Ozai is only truly shown through the surrounding world. Aang's journey takes him throughout the world that is now being controlled and conquered by the Fire Nation. But Ozai himself does not do much until the final season. In fact, his face is not seen until the final season, which quite honestly makes him a non-entity for a majority of the show. Sure, his story and how it affects Zuko is quite present and directly influential, but genuinely think about how Ozai doesn't really do all that much in the show. The strength of his villainy is that overarching presence he has for the entirety of the show. He may not be the one fighting Aang initially, but his will is being enacted throughout his nation. He is a powerful shadow who's controlling the world like an invisible puppet master, but his presence and importance is always noticeable and present, and that lack of any direct confrontation with the Fire Lord makes his reveal and final confrontation all that more tense and powerful. His nation has done unspeakable things by his command, and his supreme control makes Aang's mission all that more essential. And once it's revealed that Ozai's plan is not to control the world but to literally torch it to the ground, it just emphasizes the pure evil of Ozai and the necessity for Team Avatar to take him down. And with that, let's talk about that victorious ending. All of these stories and different arcs work together to move the show to an inevitable and final confrontation between Team Avatar and the Fire Nation. Let's start with Zuko. One of the most powerful moments in the entire show is when he meets back with his uncle. It's so beautiful to see this. Seeing Zuko mess up time and time again and stab his uncle in the back time and time again makes his uncle's immediate forgiveness of Zuko all the more beautiful. It's just such a captivating and powerful message, and it really is an awesome thing to see. But another part of Zuko's story is his duel with Azula. I mentioned in the villains segment how Azula's mental health really takes a hit after Mai and Ty Lee betray her, and this finale heavily emphasizes this fact. Her insanity is ramped up to unimaginable levels during these final 4 episodes, shown through that wacky haircut she rocks, and Zuko's story really comes full circle when he challenges the now crazed Azula to a duel. Instead of fighting against Katara like he did in the caves, he sides with her and faces Azula. It's a beautiful moment for Zuko to not only know that Azula is off her rocker a little bit, but also to fight her alone and not drag Katara into it. But once the fight actually does start, bro, how did the team make a fight so exciting and genuinely heartbreaking at the same time? This fight is a visual masterpiece. The blue and orange fire contrast beautifully. The fluid animation of Zuko and Azula is gorgeous. It's just a spectacle that you can't help but get engrossed in. But contrast that with the sad orchestral music in the background, which really emphasizes the tragedy of this fight. A brother and sister brought so far apart by the extremes of their situations to the point of a duel that is so visceral and hard to watch. It's just so incredibly dark. And because we've seen Zuko's story go back and forth, this fight, finally seeing Zuko fight Azula fairly, is just a perfect way to conclude his story, especially the moment where Zuko sacrifices himself for Katara's safety. Like, this is how you do a character arc, people. Earlier, I mentioned how Katara's main arc is becoming better and better at waterbending in a natural way, and this moment with Azula after Zuko is electrocuted shows how far she's come. Remember when she could barely make a wave? Well, look at her now. This is how you do a character arc, and this final confrontation between Azula and Katara is such a good conclusion to their stories. Azula is just crazed out of her mind, and Katara beats her through her ingenuity and pure badass bending ability. Just a breathtaking scene. What else can I say? Another part of this finale and why it feels so spectacular is Sokka, Toph, and Suki's story. The interesting thing about them is that their main motivation is kind of a side story. It's just to slow down as much of the Fire Nation as possible, and they do this mainly through infiltrating and taking control of an airship. And this plotline is just so exciting. It's really satisfying to have all these puzzle pieces falling into place. Aang is taking care of the Fire Lord, Zuko is taking care of Azula, the old people are taking care of Ba Sing Se, and the rest of Team Avatar are taking care of these battalion of airships raining fire on the earth below. A really powerful part of this finale is just seeing them all coordinate together and seeing how they've grown since the beginning of the show. Sokka is a natural leader now. He's adept at planning and executing complex strategies, and seeing him work with Toph and Suki is awesome and very often funny at times. Toph's always been strong, don't get me wrong, but seeing her newfound ability of metal bending to best the Fire Nation in never before seen ways is just pure awesomeness. And Suki well, she's always been kind of incredible, so her just being there adds a lot to these final fights. But this storyline with Team Avatar is just such a magnificent compliment to the finale. When I think about this finale, my mind always goes to when they use an airship to slice the rest, causing subsequent crashes. It's just so exciting, and the plan screams Sokka, if you know what I mean. And while their fight is really bombastic, there are these incredibly personal moments, like when Sokka and Toph are literally dangling over the edge and they think they're going to die. Like, seriously, I don't know if Boomerang is coming back, Toph. Like, come on, this finale is just peak. And then when Suki shows up, it's just awesome. But if you really want to talk about peak television, then look no further than Aang's story in this finale. The audience has seen him meticulously master all 4 elements and has seen all the trouble and trials he's had to endure to get to this point. So the finale feels like a culmination of months of nonstop training come to fruition, and the final fight between Ozai and Aang is just so amazing. Avatar has always had good animation, choreography, and fight direction in general, but the fight is truly something else. Sozin's Comet gives the sky an apocalyptic glow that permeates the screen and really brings the significance of this fight into realization. If Aang doesn't win this fight, the world is cooked. Literally, Ozai is going to burn everything and everyone to the ground. No pressure or anything. This final fight between Ozai and Aang is just next level in terms of tension and excitement. And any time the Avatar state is involved, it's just top tier. So when Aang enters the Avatar state, the fight goes from peak to somehow the best television of all time. Seeing Aang with this much power is so exciting, and seeing how he's mastered it and come so far is just pure awesomeness. But there's a side to this fight that's equally as interesting, where Aang has to make a decision about whether or not to take the life of Ozai. His culture and beliefs tell him that taking a life is never okay, but everyone around him is telling him to kill Ozai in order to literally save the world. And because of Aang's growth during the show from a silly kid to a more mature Avatar, this idea is unbelievably captivating. Does he have a greater obligation to his people or to the world as the Avatar? And that question actually brings a lot of tension to this final fight, because not only does Aang have to save the world, but he might have to do it in a way that violates everything he stands for. So this final fight between Ozai and Aang feels so victorious once it's actually over, because Aang chooses not to kill him, but he still wins. He beats Ozai on his own terms. Instead of killing him, he learns to take his bending away, rendering him helpless. And let's not skip over how unbelievably well choreographed, filmed, and designed this scene is. Just a level of quality that adds so much pressure and power to Aang's final decision. And it also showcases how far he's come, using Toph's strategy to feel where Ozai is and using his mastered ability of Earth and all of the different bendings to take his bending away. And I think this shot perfectly sums up everything I've been saying in this video. The story of Avatar, especially Aang's journey, is so meticulously planned out and orchestrated in order for this moment and these final episodes to hit so unbelievably hard. All of these different arcs, from Aang's linear hero's journey to Zuko's anti-hero to hero story, and Azula and Ozai's increased villainy, build perfectly to these final episodes. Sozin's Comet is a movie. It is not 4 episodes put into one. It is a beautifully created flex of a finale. Every story leads us to this masterpiece and powerhouse of a finale. A beautifully animated, masterfully written, geniusly paced, and genuinely perfect conclusion to one of the best shows ever made. And if you watched this whole video and haven't watched it, please do so now. I do not care what you are doing. You could be in the middle of performing surgery. Put that on pause and watch all 3 seasons of this show. You won't regret it. But thanks to everyone who stopped by and checked out this video. I really like talking about this one because I just love this show so much. If you want me to talk about The Legend of Korra, let me know, because that's another show I could talk about for hours. Thanks for watching this video. God bless all of you. Have a good day, friends.